Are there any real advantages to using raised garden beds versus conventional row gardening? Yes. I'm going to show you 7 advantages of using raised bed gardens now. Hey guys, it's Daryl from Louisiana Simple Living. Thanks for joining me back out in the garden. Today we're going to talk about the 7 top advantages of using raised beds out in your backyard garden. So I'd go over and borrow my dad's tiller, come in the backyard and chop up, cultivate the back of my yard to try to put some rows in. There's a lot of clay underneath the soil. Had varying levels of success with the conventional row gardening, but very inadequate in my opinion. So I was kind of looking for something different. So I started doing some researching around raised bed gardening, square foot gardening. My father-in-law gave me a number of years back. Kind of did some research and figured out there's got to be a better way, and found a better way, and that's raised beds. And so there are many distinct advantages of raised beds. The top 7 in my opinion are: number 1 is soil quality and not being dependent upon your in-ground soil. Number 2, no till necessary. We don't have to cultivate the ground. You got everything already in place. Number 3, retain moisture for the plants but allow excess water to drain. Number 4 is more efficient use of your backyard. So as opposed to having really long rows, you're going to have a pretty tight centered raised bed. So it's more efficient use of your backyard space. Number 5 is less weeds, which means a lot less effort having to be out here pulling weeds. Number 6, it better facilitates companion and pollinator planting, and just in general being able to interdisperse plants all throughout your raised beds. And lastly, number 7, which is more harvest per square foot. It's my experience that you get a much better harvest with less work, and you get a better harvest per square foot. And in fact, you'll be kicking yourself for not trying that sooner. If you haven't as yet, please subscribe, like that video. Feel free to share the video as well. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the 7 key advantages of raised bed gardens. Now, the quality and composition of your soil, along with the pH, has a big impact on how well your plants will grow. So what raised beds does is it allows you to not have to be dependent upon your in-ground soil. So my soil here, again, I've tried doing rows, it has clay just a couple inches right underneath the grass. Not a very fertile soil. You have to put a bunch of amendments with it. So to have a successful garden the way I wanted to garden, I knew I wanted to go with raised beds and create a soil mix that would be a premium or optimal soil mix for what we're trying to do. Now, Mel's Mix is one that comes up that I use, or at least a variation of it, and that's from Square Foot Gardening. But basically it's a third vermiculite, a third sphagnum peat moss, and a third of a blend of compost. And I'll tell you, back 6-7 years ago when I built this new 4x16 foot bed I have, I went ahead and went to local nursery. They have something called garden mix. I loaded up my truck with garden mix, a couple loads, came and used it in my garden, and I was really not satisfied. So that garden mix that I had, I ended up having to, over the years, I've had to amend it with the same components of that soil mix with lots of compost to get it up to where it's even close to the other beds that use the Mel's Mix. So it's my recommendation, consider Mel's Mix. It's, it'll cost you a little bit to buy the different components. You can get them at your local nursery, mix them all together, put it in your new raised bed. If you got an existing raised bed and you want to do better, all you got to do is start amending with those components. A third vermiculite, a third sphagnum peat moss, and third a blend of compost. You start adding that to it, it'll enhance your soil and the soil quality be where you need it to be. So the moral of the story is, don't assume you have good soil, ensure you have great soil. All right, number 2 was no till. So you don't have to get a tractor, you don't have to get a tiller out and till up or cultivate all your soil. Once you put your raised bed in, you'll have some soil mix. That's the optimum soil mix. You don't walk in it. So we intentionally, from a raised bed garden, we limit the width of the raised beds to 4 foot. So you can reach anywhere inside that raised bed. And so what that means is you don't have to go and walk on the soil that your plant's going to grow in, so that it stays loose and friable. Now I do go and amend the soil every season, but I do that by mixing in the sphagnum peat moss, compost, and vermiculite. I'll mix some of that in with some azomite rock dust, just using a pitchfork and just mix it into the top 8-10 inches of the soil. You keep doing that over time, you're going to have to replace volume, but it's also going to keep those nutrients at the optimum level. All right, using a pitchfork in the manner I described, the top 8 or 10 inches, and mixing those soil amendments in, it keeps the soil loose and friable. It also allows our underground gardeners, and that's the earthworms, to nurture and inhabit the raised beds that we have, and they will colonize them and be all throughout your beds and helping out your plants. Hey, and one other thing you can't forget is the effort. I know when I had to go till all those darn rows, it was a lot of effort, wore you out, shook you all up, so you don't have to do that anymore. Number 3 was moisture retention, while also allowing excess water to drain. So 2 of the 3 primary soil components, you're talking Sphagnum peat moss and vermiculite, they have the ability to absorb water in it, but once it gets full, it allows it to release. So when we build our raised beds, so we raise them up off the ground, so we're depending upon physics to some extent. So you got gravity that's going to help the water go down, but you also have, like I said, the vermiculite and the Sphagnum peat moss that holds the water that you need for moisture, but allows that water to release. So using gravity, it'll release out of the raised beds, and they won't flood. Now, one of the other key things to do is use mulch. So between the Sphagnum peat moss and the vermiculite, along with mulching on top of your raised bed, it will retain moisture throughout the day, even in the hot sun in the summer we're in right now. But if there's a heavy rainfall or there's just excess water in general, it's going to release and come out of your raised beds. And number 4 is just a more efficient use of your yard, your land, and your backyard garden space. So conventional row gardens, they just take up more space to put into place to grow your plant than it will be with a raised bed garden. So if you have a 4x5 raised bed garden, that's 20 square foot, but you can put it at its most, it's only 5 foot, deep. 16 foot, or even if you did 2 8-foots, it's still going to take up a heck of a lot more space, because then you have to have a path in between to be able to get to those plants as well. So you're really talking probably 2 square foot, 3 square foot at least per plant. So you're really taking up a lot more space in your backyard. And now this may not be a concern if you got a big yard, if you got a couple acres, not a big deal. You can still be successful doing conventional row garden. But especially if you got a small suburban backyard, in my opinion, raised bed gardens take a lot less space, a lot less effort, and a lot easier to do. And tie it in with how much space it takes. Each square foot within a raised bed, you can plant a plant. It may be a carrot, it may be squash, it may be some herbs. But you can plant something within each one of those square feet. Now if you want to be generous, you could give a tomato plant or a pepper maybe an extra, get 1.5 foot square, just to give it a little more space, and that's okay. But it's just a more effective, more efficient use of space in your yard, especially your backyard. Right, number 5, and one of my favorites, is less weeds. So the soil mix we're using, if you do go with the new soil mix, those are seedless soil mixes, right? So it's not like you're digging dirt up from the ground where grass seeds have gone into. So it starts out seed-free, but you are going to have seeds that are either blown in or a bird drops them, or whatever the case may be, so you get some fresh seeds in the top of your raised beds. But the key thing is, before they get established, all you got to do is go and grab them. When you first start seeing a little bit of green coming up, you just grab them, pull them out, and it's no big effort. Nowhere near the kind of effort I used to dread when I had to go out and look at my conventional row garden, and there were weeds everywhere in the walkways where the plants are growing on top of the row, and it was just an enormous effort to do that. You will have weeds that start up in your garden, but before they get established, all you got to do is go and pick them out. That's why I talk about doing a daily inspection of your garden. With all the rain we've had lately, it's been difficult, but that's why you go out there, because you can take all these little weeds out before they become established, and it doesn't become a big problem. Now on the walkways also, we're talking about using mulch. So I use pine straw mulch. It does decompose, so you got to put some more on every year, but it works pretty well, and it keeps the weeds down to a minimum. Again, as soon as you see them, if you go ahead and pull them up before they get established, it makes it a lot easier. And so of course with a leaf mulch or something like that, if you put that on top of your bed, you're going to also not only help from retaining moisture in your bed, but also that kind of blocks out seeds from getting started that may be down in the soil. That's part of the beauty of the square foot gardening. You don't want things too close, but you want close enough so it's going to actually shade out the seeds down below. And it just kind of keeps the weeds becoming a big problem down in the soil below your plants. All right, one of the premises I follow just through all my research is to intersperse companion and pollinator plants, and all your plants actually, throughout your garden. And here's the basis. So if you got pollinator plants, so if I put a flower kind of in the center of a raised bed, that's going to pretty much draw in bees, hummingbirds, other pollinators into the middle of your raised bed garden. And it just gives a better opportunity for those pollinators to go ahead and hit any of the other flowers of your vegetable plants that are growing in your garden. And doing that, interspersing those plants, is easy to do in a square foot garden. It's a lot different kind of concept when you're in more of a linear type of conventional row gardening. So I intersperse marigolds, I intersperse zinnias, some different kinds of flowers also throughout my garden. And even from a pest control standpoint and even a disease prevention standpoint, I like to try to disperse my plants of the same type throughout the raised beds. All right, what I mean by that, let's say we want to plant 9 squash plants. Do I plant them all together in one raised bed, all next to each other, adjacent to each other? You can, and it works fine. It's actually, from an efficiency standpoint, it's kind of better because they're all right there. You can go look at them all. But your squash bugs and your squash vine borer moths are going to have a much easier time getting on that one area and attacking all the plants. Or that squash vine borer to put an egg on every stalk of those 9. Whereas if I put them in different places throughout my backyard garden, you may be able to get a better chance of having a couple of plants that don't get the squash vine borer or squash bugs on them. So if you look at tomatoes, just think about that. So you may have the caterpillars or hornworm on one plant. If your branches are touching right up close to each other, he could jump over to your other plant. And if you got any kind of bacterial wilt or blight, that could easily jump over onto another plant if they're adjacent to each other. And number 7 is more harvest per square foot. Do the tight, compact, but healthy orientation of how we can plant our plants in a raised bed garden versus a conventional row. It just allows us a better chance to have more produce per square foot. Now, if you have a plant and you like put 2 or 3 foot between each one, that one individual plant probably is going to have an optimum. It's possibly going to have a better harvest for that one plant. But within a raised bed, if you have them closer together and you got the right soil mix and you're taking care of things the way you're supposed to, the harvest is going to blow away what you have over in your conventional rows, especially for the amount of square foot you're taking up. If you think about it also, you got a 4x4 bed, 5x4 bed, let's just say that's 20 square foot. What if you have a 1x16 or 1x20, which would be the same equivalent square foot conventional row? Now that conventional row is going to take up more than that square foot per plant, right? So you got the row that's raised, then you got a walkway on each side of it, most likely, but let's just say it's 1, so you end up having 32 to 40 square foot taken up by that, and it runs a span, a length, much bigger than the 4x5. So it just takes up a whole lot more room, but you also have a better harvest than what you got in your raised bed garden. And look, with the right soil mix and the allowed spacing in a raised bed garden, you're going to get a better harvest per square foot than a conventional row. Hey guys, thanks for joining me back over at Louisiana Simple Living again today. Did a video on the 7 key advantages of raised beds. And if you watch any of my garden videos, you know how much I enjoy raised beds. I spend a lot of my time out here. Gardening is kind of my joy. It's my hobby. And I also like sharing it with other people. And hopefully they can learn and enjoy the gardening lifestyle as well. And again, I did try using conventional rows here. It was actually kind of out back toward the fence there. I had a couple of 3 or 4 rows. And just the amount of effort to try to keep it weed free, to keep it growing, to amend the soil. Was just a heck of a lot of effort. I wanted an alternative, and I found one, and that's raised beds. I did the research, made that jump to raised bed garden, and look, I haven't looked back. My dad and my neighbor have both been gardening for 50 plus years. They've always used conventional rows, and over the last 2 or 3 years, both of them have decided to switch to raised beds based on the success I've had here, coming over and taking a look at the garden, checking out the videos and all that. So it's convinced some guys have been doing it for 50 plus years and been very successful as gardeners. If you haven't as yet, please subscribe, ring that notification bell. Hey, like the video and share the video. As I like to remind everybody, is make memories now rather than later. We got this another COVID kind of surge coming. It's probably going to get worse before it gets better. So make memories now while you can. In fact, yesterday my family and in-laws went to the World War II Memorial in New Orleans. That's a pretty cool place if you haven't been there yet. If you haven't been, it's really nice. You know, I love history. The history of the nation is incredibly important, and so is the history of World War II and all the commitments that everybody made back in World War II, enabled to keep America strong, keep it going. And it is just a reminder about how great a country we live in. And thanks to all of you guys and girls out there who have been in the military and helped defend our freedom. So get out in your backyard and grow something. And as always, I will see you on the next video.